the whole point of catalyzing, you're kickstarting the conversation. And whether or not it's yours to see through, I mean, only the universe will show you that when it's time. But I think where we can, for Catalyst, the place that we can really take comfort and confidence in is knowing that we got the ball rolling when other people weren't even willing to start that push.
Hi, I'm Tracy Lovejoy.
And I'm Shannon Lucas. We are the co-CEOs of Catalyst Constellations, which is dedicated to empowering Catalyst to create bold, powerful change in the world.
This is our podcast, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out, where we speak with Catalyst executives about ways to successfully lead transformation in large organizations.
And today I'm super excited to have time with Jessica Crow. Welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and for our conversation today.
I am super excited for it too. For our listeners, Jessica Crow is the founder of Apogee, a business transformation solutions company specializing in change management training, coaching, and consulting. Jessica is passionate about empowering people to power organizational change through conscious change leadership, a mindful approach to modern change leaders who want to lead and work in a more balanced way while still achieving success. In addition to Apogee, Jessica is an adjunct professor, a yoga instructor, and a keynote speaker. So I'm guessing our audience can see why I'm excited for this conversation. Let's just jump right in. I mean, I gave you this sort of quick snapshot of what you do, but I'd love to hear about your journey through the lens of your catalyticness and maybe some of the highlights or challenges that you want to share with us.
Yeah. I mean, I spent some time reflecting before we connected, and it's so nice to see you again. Thank you again for having me on this show. I love what you and Tracy are doing and how you're helping organizations and the people that work there really understand themselves and how they can be better contributors and drivers of innovation by, understanding what their nature is and how to work with others. So kudos to you. And thanks for having me on the show. When I spent time reflecting, I was thinking back, like, when did this really start for me? And I was thinking about in college where, I sort of realized that I was willing to be a black sheep, willing to kind of go against the grain to get what I wanted or to be different or to do things in a way that I found more effective and, just more, maybe even more fun for me. So my example is that I had a really wacky summer job. I sold books door to door. I was a door-to-door salesperson. Yeah. So this was 20 years ago. This was like right when the internet, it was around, but like people were still relying on encyclopedias and homework manuals. And I was probably at the tail end of that industry, really going away. But I sold books. And the reason was because I wanted to make money quickly so I could do the things that I wanted to while I was in college, because I went to a school where it seemed like everybody had affluence. And I was like, lower middle class, here I am, ready to learn. But I also wanted to play too. And so I was willing to do the job that most people would not do. Door-to-door sales is really hard, but I learned about resilience. I learned about failure. I learned about rejection. And that was such an important part of my journey to where I am today. It really built up my capability. And then after college, I had several jobs. And in each role, I found myself being attracted to the projects that were really gnarly. They were really hard. Most people didn't want them. It seemed like too much work or effort. And I was like, sign me up. That seems like a good idea. Or that seems like something I want to try to figure out. I can see the value. I can't necessarily explain why I'm so attracted to it, but I want to go in that direction. So for example, helped launch one of the first sustainability reports for the organization I was in. I've helped create, the first intranet in one organization. And then at the organization I was at before I left, to start Apogee, I was brought on to do change management for the largest and the first digital, massive digital transformation for the organization. So I found myself really being attracted to those types of projects. And actually right before I left and started Apogee, it was a project that nobody had wanted. They tried it multiple times and failed. And I was like, I think we can crack this nut. I think we can do it. It was hard to articulate why, but my intuition was like, I think we got this. I think we're going to figure it out through trial and error. I was more than happy to go through that learning process. And unfortunately, I left before I got to see that project come to fruition. But a year later, one of the, directors on my team, my previous team, was like, hey, it worked. We did it. We finished it. We saw it through. Like, it was a big restructuring of 200 people that were supporting thousands of clinical clinicians and technicians. And it was a really big undertaking, huge change management, huge culture change. And while I didn't get to see that happen, I love that it actually ended up happening after I left, and probably with a lot of changes. I don't know, what kind of unfolded after that. But, you mentioned earlier, change management, change, its intersection. Part of the reason why I started Apogee, which is the firm that I have today, and bringing in this concept of conscious change leadership, is because I saw a better way to do change management in the workplace. Everything we do, in all business strategy gets executed through people. That is change. And so getting better at implementing change is really a requirement, I think, of organizations that want to be agile and innovative. But what was missing is that the change management training and teachings were very, systematic. There wasn't a huge emphasis on leadership development, which is, as you talk about in your book and through this podcast, who you are and how you show up will have a direct impact on your ability to actually catalyze what you're trying to do. And there was absolutely no conversation around well-being. Part of this is about burnout, right? I left because I burnt out. I didn't have the awareness or the tools to really understand what I was feeling or experiencing. And it wasn't until after, through coaching, through therapy, through, tons of yoga, and through a lot of research, that I realized this is all connected: well-being, leadership development, change management. So that's why I created Apogee, as a way to provide people with a more well-rounded, holistic approach. And the idea is that it's going to have a positive impact on the people that, you work with and through, and organizations can really start to build environments where culture and, change and innovation and people, everyone's thriving. So that was a very long-winded intro, but that's the whole story. That's the
so many things to respond to. Okay, let me see. I want to start with, it's hilarious. I did the door-to-door sales thing too. And I think—
Did you really?
I did. I did it for a nonprofit, but it was like one of the hardest, most character building things you ever
Totally.
did.
I love that.
And I also really like the way that you talked about, there was this wicked big problem that nobody else was even willing to tackle. Like, we just had this conversation with the customer, and I get excited about it. Like, everyone else is running, right? And I'm like, but I was like, what's your chance of success? He's like 40%. I was like, let's do it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
I also wanted to compliment you on the kind of owning, with the caveats, owning the impact that the change management process that you started, that got realized after you left, because that's really hard for Catalyst. And I'm wondering if you can maybe talk a little bit about that experience, because almost by definition, as starters, we're not there when the thing is fully realized. And so a lot of Catalysts have and I used to do this too, can I own the fact that these two major acquisitions that happened at the organization after I built out the strategy happened after I left? And I was like, yeah, because the same thing happened. Someone called me up and were like, that thing that we were doing, they did it, right?
Yeah.
So do you have advice for people? Because it can feel a little bit awkward sometimes.
I mean, I like that you said awkward. Ultimately, it made me feel kind of down. I was bummed. I was bummed when I left. I'm like, I didn't get to see this through, it's been years, a lot of self-reflection. I think the advice I would give is just accepting and being okay with that, because you're starting it. The whole point of catalyzing, you're kickstarting the conversation, and whether or not it's yours to see through. I mean, only the universe will show you that when it's time. But I think where we can, for Catalyst, the place that we can really take comfort and confidence in is knowing that we got the ball rolling when other people weren't even willing to start that push. And so that has been my sort of healing journey and part of the reason I was bummed too is that I chose to stay on that project and in the role that I was versus take a promotion going on another team that was all about change management, which years ago had been my dream job. And I was like, okay, we'll never follow a project. But however, for someone like us, I was more motivated by the potential of that change than the title and the role of change management within the organization. So it really is recognizing that we're doing so much good just by starting that conversation and being willing to be the person who gets in the ring, whether or not we see how it ends is, I think it's just accepting that that's maybe not our path all the time. But it took that wasn't easy. I took a lot of time to get to that point, but it certainly is something I feel comfortable with now.
Awesome. It's really strong advice. And I encourage people listening to like go back and rethink potentially their resume, their bio, whatever, and be like, you get to take ownership because like that thing wouldn't have existed.
Right.
If you weren't there. And to your earlier point, it might have looked very different by the time it got implemented from the original.
Yeah.
But it would have if you had stayed the whole time anyway. So
exactly.
A lot of grace there.
Yeah.
All right. So I already have goosebumps, but diving in more into the change management intersection, right? And like Tracy was here last week, and one of the epiphanies that we've been talking about, which is not particularly revolutionary, but it's like, there's no, like when we talk about change fatigue now, or like getting our hands around change, like there's so much change. It's actually just not humanly possible for us to take it on. Right?
Yep.
And I am not a change management expert, so this is why I would love your thinking around this. But it's like, change management programs were developed in days where that was not exactly true. There was change, but it wasn't like all variables were changing all the time at this speed.
Right.
I'm wondering for catalysts, who are working with organizations to leverage change management tools while recognizing the emotional toll that even the catalysts are getting change fatigue now, right? I mean,
absolutely.
It's crazy. Yeah. So how do you think about that intersection right now, advice, where it's headed?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I'm really glad you want to approach this. This is so catalyst of you, right? let's talk it through. So change management is and I know, intellectually, this, but it's a practice. I'm going to say multimodality. You're bringing lots of concepts and theories together to create this approach that leaders can take in an organization. And to your earlier point, in the past, it was something that allowed you to implement changes sort of systematically, like one at a time. Now, there was lots of changes happening all the time. I'm going to say back then, using air quotes, because back 10, 20 years ago. Now change is happening iteratively, and it has been going in this direction, but there's lots of big changes as organizations are trying to keep pace with all the different innovation, AI, tech, geopolitical, it's all over the place. So what I will say about change fatigue is not just due to having too much change in the workplace. It's due to multiple internal factors and external factors. So you could have all of these changes happening in your organization, but if you also tie in like a lack of clarity, lack of prioritization, lack of leadership engagement, that's going to amplify your feelings of stress, which create change fatigue. What wasn't talked about historically, and what I'm hoping we can start the conversation on, is that whether we like it or not, we're bringing all of our outside world into this too. So for me, when I went through burnout, I was trying to raise a family. I was a foster parent. I was doing all of these different things that also created stress. So I had change and disruption in every area of my life. And I did not have a way to stop and be like, okay, what is actually going on? What is the most important? So my advice to people that I talk to, that I teach, is a couple of different things. One, you do need to get your self-leadership under control. So what I mean by that is, what are the practices that you're doing to bring yourself back in balance? Because I'm guessing, and having read your book, Shannon, this is exactly what I did. Instead of prioritizing meditation and fitness and sleep, I made the trade-off of working more because I thought I'd get ahead. I thought I'd reduce my to-do list. And instead, I just made myself miserable. So you really have to be good about creating boundaries so you can stay in balance, and then you can be more effective in the workplace. It does require responsibility on the leader who is in the workplace to take a look at all of the changes that are happening. If someone says, everything is important, then nothing is important.
That's
there really
right.
has to be a rigorous conversation around prioritization. And a lot of organizations, it's like, sure, we want to prioritize, but I hate to say this, the reality is organizations, especially publicly held companies, the priorities of the leaders will likely be more siloed than not because they are caring about their team, their objectives. And so if they have a change, they need to see it through. But then you've got a leader over here in a different team and they have the same sort of mindset. And so it really is going to require a big culture shift, I think, in many organizations that how can we change and innovate in a way that keeps our employees' well-being, our employees' productivity in mind, and not just like what's best for the team, but the collective. That's going to be hard, I think, for a lot of leaders, because I know when I had my team back then, I wanted them to be successful. I wanted our project to be seen through. And it took, it's going to take some real deep, I think, work from leaders. It's necessary to really think about, okay, how can we behave in a way that, one, we're taking care of ourselves, our team are taking care of themselves through that self-leadership, but also we're thinking really broadly about all of the different things that are happening in the organization at the same time. And are we giving those top priorities really the space and birth for people to accept them, to adopt them, to continue those ways of working? Otherwise, you're just going to keep rolling things out and people are going to stick with it for a short amount of time and then probably go back to what they were doing before, the path of least resistance, right? So hopefully that was responsive to your question, but that's how I sort of think about it.
So there's two key things here, and I love this intersection. It's the self-leadership, which is such a great term. Totally going to be borrowing that.
Yes, please do.
Putting your oxygen mask on,
yes.
Understanding what your capacity is at any time, just like being really clear and resourced yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the actual leader in the organization's role, and not just the business side, but also like showing up, understanding that as a whole person who's in front of you every day.
Yes.
And there's an interesting thing when we're like, this comes up so often now in the work we do, which is I would say the partnership between those two. Because as a leader, you don't always know, and it's not even always appropriate to ask or talk about what's going on in the employee's life. But conversely, when you're the employee, if the leader's giving you the like sixth high priority thing and you just don't have the capacity for it, self-leadership at that point is about actually saying something. Because like when I lead, and I tell people this because I want them to know, I will keep giving things until you say, I'm at capacity, I need help prioritizing. And I'm like, that's such a great conversation that just happened this week, right? Like, congratulations because I don't know, I don't have visibility into your world. So I'm wondering how you help sort of both sides or organizations. That's not a muscle that most organizations have.
It's not a muscle. And it really is hard if you're in a position where you're a high performer, high potential, you will get the work sent your way because you deliver. And then when a leader relies on you, that's consistent, pulling back and saying, hey, I can't or no, that actually doesn't land well with your leader, unfortunately. And it's not that, like, I love that your response to the person that you were talking to is like, great, let's talk about this, because clearly you understand how all of this works. But leaders who don't have that awareness of the individual and how they're feeling, their well-being, how they're going to burn out if they don't deal with this, they're thinking, oh, you've been doing this for so long and now you can't, like, what the heck? It's a really important conversation for both. So let's talk about the person who needs to manage up, right? It's not saying no. It's not saying I can't do that. It's saying, hey, help me prioritize. I'm feeling this way. Here's what's happening. What are the top 3 things? And if we had to have a couple things drop, what could those things be? Or, hey, we can do that, but this is my top priority. This is my team's top priority. We may need to bring somebody else on. So it also helps you figure out how to negotiate for additional resources. So that's with middle managers. That's the conversation. It's how do you navigate that with your leadership who has expected you to be that go, go, go. And that's part of it. And then it's also creating boundaries and just being okay with, if you put this boundary in place where you're not responding on the weekends or you're taking this time, and they don't like that, then like that's a different conversation. You have to take care of yourself and be okay with that. And maybe, that's not the right place if they're not okay with you not working, or not working, but you know what I'm saying? Like there needs to be some healthy respect there. As a leader, it's drawing awareness to the fact that this is real. Burnout is real. Change fatigue is real. And they have a unique and special responsibility to care for their employees like people, that there is somebody, not just a resource, right? A cog in the wheel on the other side of the conversation. And I would imagine most leaders do feel that way. And I think there's still a huge opportunity for people who are leading teams, large teams, big projects, to really invest in that self-reflection of what is my decision, what impact is my decision-making and my ambition and my goals for the team having on the collective, like productivity, well-being. Am I seeing people quit? Am I seeing what's the culture? So it's going to require some self-reflection on that leader and awareness that they will burn out their best employees and they will leave. And then you've got, everybody else who wants to do good work, I'm sure too. But yeah, I think that's how I approach it. How would you approach it? I guess if you're, I know you work a lot with organizations and you're probably providing coaching on both sides too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's all the same skills, and it's like having everyone in the training or conversation, like, and bringing really basic tools so you can like de-risk it and not make it personal. So like an Eisenhower matrix, right? It's like, hey, here's my work. Like I can do these things up top, but the things that aren't as important and not impactful, like I can't do.
Right.
What you helped me see, which is really interesting, and again, might not be profound for listeners, but we talk a lot about accountability, like accountability, empowerment equals results is one of our Catalyst Leadership Trust members likes to say.
I like that.
But the accountability is, I hope leaders and the employees understand that accountability is really the two-way street. Like I think leaders think like, okay, you are accountable for getting this done. And that's usually where their brain stops as they think about it. But the employee's accountability actually is, I am accountable to tell you what's going to impact me being able to get that done in the way that you want to get it done, right? All right. I want to double click those. So like as a change management expert, I'm going to call you. What are some of the trends that you're seeing around change management, maybe the biggest challenges or the biggest wins for Catalyst leading change management programs, especially in large organizations?
So this is super timely. I actually just participated in a webinar yesterday. Melanie Franklin, she's out of the UK. I think her company is called Capability for Change. She just launched a report where she had people from across the world. It's like 4 years into the survey. So she has a report based from change practitioners, from people who are operations strategy leaders. And she was able to summarize the insights from the responses. And here's what she's seeing. And again, this is her work, but I'll be sharing it what I remember, hopefully. I'll send you the link to put it in the show notes. Yeah. So a couple of things. One, the value of change management. What we're not doing a great job of doing is explaining the value period. So adoption has been this focus for years and years and years, like that's your ROI, that's your benefit. Well, that's part of it. That's a leading indicator. Your real value is the cost savings, the commercial metrics, right? The increase in revenue, the increase in time efficiencies. Those are the benefits, but we're not doing a good job as change management practitioners of explaining how what we're doing actually drives business outcomes. Adoption is a byproduct of our effort, but then the actual business outcomes are what happen when people adopt the solution. So we need to do a better job because it's still hard for change management. There's a lot of organizations that have like one or two people doing change management, which is a little bit crazy because everybody is responsible for change management. And my belief, and I think the growing acceptance is more people, if you're in a leadership role, you should understand change management theory and concepts, period. It'll change how you make decisions. It'll influence your strategy, your planning. So just having that baseline knowledge is important. The other insights that came from it is that leadership engagement is really low compared to year over year. So having that senior leader And she actually mentioned, and I don't know how this is going to play out, but I thought it was sort of interesting. She, in the United States, we've now got Trump as our president, and she was suggesting that there could be a shift towards more of a top-down leadership approach versus the distributed where we might have been going. I don't know if that will actually play out, but she was saying, we're seeing that, like, she's suggesting this might be part of it, but also leaders are lacking engagement. We need to do better there anyways. So it's almost a call to action. If you're in a leadership role, you can't delegate that out. You have to really be present and active and driving that change forward if that is your position. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Some of the other insights, let's see, I'm trying to think. Those two certainly stood out to me, but oh gosh, I'll just have to include the link. It was a really great, hopefully I can get the link to the webinar too. So it'd be really helpful for people to watch. I took notes in my email, but I don't have them in front of me. Long story short though, the big picture is that change management, we need to do a better job of articulating the ROI from what we're doing and linking it to business outcomes, and leaders need to be more engaged in the process. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot of people trying to implement change, but not really having anybody driving the ship. So I think that's a call to action. Otherwise, yeah, you're not going to get the value from what it is that you're trying to implement.
100%. It's like, you need to understand the strategies, the direction of the organization, and the ROI that you're providing, aligned to those things. I mean, it's like, we can get really excited about like the thing that's right in front of us, but it's like contextualizing it for upper management and really actually helping, I think, the people around you. Like you said, everyone is actually responsible for change management. And so if they can see like how the thing that they're being asked to do or they're suggesting that they do around change is going to tie to those big strategic goals is like super important to decrease the resistance.
That's been elusive for change management practitioners, that ability to tie what they're doing to the big picture business outcomes. And I don't know why it's been so hard for many people to do that. One person on the webinar suggested that they weren't as comfortable with analytics. I don't know if that's it. I think it is difficult to isolate the specific interventions that you're doing and saying, well, we did training and communications and therefore it resulted in this. But, I think maybe that's the opportunity area as we move forward, is getting really discrete or specific about what we're doing and how that links to the business outcomes, because that has been a challenge for people in the profession for years and years and years. And it's also why I think there's value in everyone understanding how to do change management, because then at least we're all rowing in the same direction.
Totally. And it's, it's interesting because it's as I was listening to you, originally what I was hearing was like about being able to articulate the ROI to the leadership, but it really is like, I remember any new like system that gets rolled out around the organization, right? Like sales, new CRM, new ERP, whatever it is, the resistance that happens, people still have their little like spreadsheets on the side.
Yeah, that's true.
The ability to articulate the value to any of the stakeholders that you are trying to bring along. So interesting contemplation. And it's a lot of emotional labor, which is what ends up leading to the burnout and Yes.
And what you're saying is true and fair as well. Like that part is important to remember, that people are wedded to their current ways. And that's why resistance does come up. And that does have an impact on how quickly you can capture that value. And so that's a very valid point and something to think about as you're in that seat of leading people and teams through change, and how do we bring it all together? Because that won't go away. I don't think that's going to ever go away. It's just, how do you accelerate that process through the interventions you're doing from a change management perspective? But as a leader, and this to bring this whole conversation full circle, what I see as the biggest call to action is that self-leadership piece is one, and then really being mindful of the skills from a leadership. Like I talk about connection, communication, collaboration, and compassion. And that sounds maybe a little woo-woo or soft. I mean, those leadership skills are not new. They've been around for a long time, but we really need to lean into that interpersonal, those power skills, especially as technology replaces more of these tasks that made us experts or specialists, or it's like, somebody who I remember, again, this is a while ago, people who could do things in Excel that I couldn't do. I'm like, oh my gosh, they must be so much smarter than me. And now I'm like, wait a second. I just didn't know how to build macros, but I'll just go talk to ChatGPT or, Bing AI or something. I don't know. It'll figure it out for me. So if we are relying on our technical skills, fine. The power, the people skills are going to be so important regardless of what you know. If you're going to lead and influence, you have to be able to connect with people, communicate effectively, work well with others. And then that compassion piece really does link to that self-leadership and respecting that in yourself and what your team needs.
Amen.
Amen.
Landed the plane and did the mic drop all at the same time. All right. The fun question at the end as we wrap. We'd love to hear about your favorite catalyst, past or present, who inspires you and why.
So Sarah Blakely is probably my favorite catalyst. I don't know if I was listening to some of your past podcasts. I don't know if she's come up.
No, that name hasn't
the
come
ones
up.
that I heard.
I don't know
Yeah, so she's the founder of Spanx, and now she's got this shoe that I don't know what I think about it, but I don't even know.
The weird sneaker thing.
It's a weird sneaker. It's cute, but I'm like, I don't know. I've got Spanx. They're great. What I love about her though, is that she was willing to follow this dream, this vision that she couldn't articulate to everyone effectively. And she went through so many no's and so many iterations. And then she kept seeing it through, and she trusted her intuition when she did not have the data, which I think is what catalysts do. They blend a lot of information, right? And this is again what I've gathered from what I've learned from you and Tracy, and you're following that thread. And so that's what she did. And then she became this incredibly, billion-dollar, she's worth billions of dollars, and she's kept that compassion, that kindness, that thread throughout as well. So I'm inspired by her. I think how she's approached her life and work is very admirable. And I love that she's tapped into those, soft skills, intuition, those things too, to help her along the way. And I think that's just a template that I would like to follow. I don't know if I know Apogee may not ever be $1 billion company, but at least I can model her ways of being. But anyways, yeah, she's who I think of when I think of catalysts I admire.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I just want to say, even for maybe you, but certainly us, we know the importance of being able to articulate the vision and stuff, but it's it's so much easier when you're sitting outside, but when you're on your own journey and you're so connected to the thing and you have this passion, and it's something that we continue to struggle with. So I just want to throw that out there to people. That part of the journey is not easy. And plus you should be constantly in sensing mode. And it's when we started, we were we want to help all the catalysts do all the things.
Right.
That's not a business plan.
Yeah. Right. But it clearly you've kind of gone through the iterations to narrow it down and find the space that you play best in or can help the most people. So I love that. That's really great advice.
Jessica, I could talk to you for hours. We might have to have you back on the podcast. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much for having me on. This was a joy. I appreciate the time and everything that you're doing to help catalysts who are out there better understand themselves and how they can work with others and really be effective in the places that they work. So thank you.
Thank you. And to our listening audience, thanks so much for joining us. If you'd like to learn more about how to create bold, powerful change in the world, be sure to check out our book, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out, or go to our website at catalystconstellations.com. And if you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, please take 10 seconds to rate out on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcast. And of course, if you have catalysts in your life, hit the share button and send a link their way. Thanks again.